Hello there, in this video I'm going to be talking about Seamus Heaney's poem Midterm Break. This is mainly for use for IB English A students for their individual oral commentary, but it can be used for any other students studying this poem. So to begin with, I'm going to talk about the title and then work through an introduction and then the various sections of the poem. The title Midterm Break seems to have connotations of positivity. It's a time of relaxation and vacation for most people. However, this is not an intentional or not a planned break for Heaney. He was at boarding school and he's taking out of boarding school because of a family tragedy. So the actual title is quite misleading and ironic. The poem itself, to introduce it for your oral commentary, the poem is reflects an incident in Heaney's real life. His 4-year-old brother Christopher was killed in a road accident, and the poem deals with Heaney's reaction to this and processing of it. Initially, he's unable to process it. He describes other people in great detail, but not himself. And then gradually, we see him starting to realise what's happened and start to process his own grief. But it's in a very toned down manner. It's not full of emotion, which makes the whole thing more realistic and tragic. Okay, so to go through the poem in various sections, I've colour-coded it so you can see where the poem develops. To begin with, obviously Heaney at boarding school. He's in the sick bay, counting bells, knelling classes to a close. Look at those, the plosive C's there and the L's, the hard consonants there. Give a sense of something's harsh has happened, something not right. And knelling is an unusual use of the verb knell. Usually the death knell is connected with funerals, so perhaps foreshadowing something that's occurred. And at 2 o'clock, first reference to time, the neighbours drive him home. This is because his parents didn't own a car, but it seems unusual that they wouldn't come and fetch him. So another indication that something's happened, but Heaney doesn't explain what for quite a long time, so it keeps our interest building in this poem. As Heaney then describes entering the house, his home, in the porch, which is the outside entrance to the house. He sees his father crying. Is unusual, given, if you know any of Heaney's other poems, his father is quite a macho type of character, not prone to crying much, so something clearly has gone wrong. Big Jim Evans is obviously a family friend, again a physical type of guy by the sound of his description there, Big Jim Evans. But a very unfortunate phrase, saying it was a hard blow. As we learn later, it's a road accident. So the phrase "a hard blow" he means it's a terrible thing to happen for the family. But the way he describes it is again adds to the unfortunate, it adds to the kind of awkward nature of Heaney when he gets there. Becoming even more awkward is when he does walk into the house. That his brother or his sister, I'm not sure, the young baby in the house, cooed and laughed and rocked the pram. Very iambic the sentence there, or line. Again, in contrast to the somber mood, the baby is happy to see Heaney for the first time in weeks. Heaney, on the other hand, very embarrassed by what's happened, very awkward. And old men standing to shake his hand normally wouldn't happen. They recognise Heaney and recognise something significant has happened, but they wouldn't. This is out of the ordinary for them to stand up and shake his hand. And this enjambment, again, this lack of unity here and cohesion. They tell me they're sorry for my trouble. This euphemism doesn't really mean very much. Again, adds to the kind of awkward nature here. Whispers inform strangers suggests that some of the people in the house weren't actually very well known to Heaney. They're there to help, but actually they don't know who Heaney is. But it also helps to tell us a little bit about the situation. Next, we're introduced to the mother, who has quite a different reaction to the father. The mother is unable to really process what's happened. Also, tearless sighs is quite a moving phrase. Angry as well at the injustice of what's happened. But she's there to try and comfort Heaney, so she is trying to hold everything in. And so we see lots of descriptions of other people, but not of Heaney yet, because, as I say, he's not really processing what's happened. He's going through this terribly private tragedy in quite a public place with lots of people at his house. Again, another reference to time here, and very matter of fact, the ambulance arrived with the corpse, a very cold and detached phrase for the brother. And we see Heaney not really coming to grips with what's happened here in this section. the following stanza moves forward, so there's a a change in tone here. Another reference to time. The next morning, he goes up to visit the room where his brother is lying. And we see these important images here of snowdrops and candles. Snowdrops are the first flowers of winter when light starts to appear. So they symbolize hope. They have connotations of hope. And candles are used in religious ceremonies, often for prayer. So again, quite calming type images here. Both of these are said to soothe the bedside. That isn't really what happens. They start to soothe Heaney, or they seem to. And this technique is called a transferred epithet. Heaney doesn't perhaps realise what's happening to himself, but this seems to be what's occurring. And then he describes seeing his brother for the first time in 6 weeks because he's been away. Paler now, comparing him to an earlier version of the brother, suggests he might just be asleep even. And we see this continue into the next section. There's a lot of restraint here, and he's not pouring on the emotion, which makes it more realistic and terrible. Wearing a poppy bruise on the left temple. Everything seems to slow down now as we describe what's happening. The poppy bruise is obviously of relevance. It's an unusual phrase. Wearing it suggests it isn't actually part of him. Poppies have connotations of remembrance when somebody's died, or a memorial of somebody. They're also used obviously to make opium, which is again a form of healing, if you like, and hope. The bruise on the left temple, we're told, is because the victim, the brother, was knocked clear of the accident by the car, so there's no other marks. He lay in the 4-foot box as in a cot. This similarly suggests again he's asleep. And Heaney is struggling to process what's happened here entirely. Although this section is much calmer and less awkward and less embarrassed. It's much more personal, as it's just the two of them together. And then finally, this final line is of note. It's the only single line stanza in the poem, so clearly it's designed to stand out, and it really does. We feel real pathos here. A 4-foot box, a foot for every year. 4-foot box, they're all stressed monosyllabic words that really stand out, and you get a sense of Heaney's anger and injustice and frustration and grief at what's happened. There's a very emotional outburst there almost. A foot for every year returns to an iambic, maybe a softer type of rhythm at the end, a sign perhaps of the healing that's at some stage is going to begin. But a very poignant, tragic last line that explains in a bit more detail about the victim and what's happened. And we see Heaney himself here finally coming to terms, or perhaps starting to process what has occurred. Okay, at the end of your commentary, you should also talk about form and structure where possible. This particular poem uses iambic pentameter. It's a da-dum, da-dum, da-dum type rhythm with 5 stressed parts to each line. It's not entirely consistent, which perhaps reflects the confusion and uncertainty that Heaney's feeling here. The tercets, 3-line syllables, are used, apart from the single line, obviously, at the end, which really does stand out. And to talk about this, you should talk about it as a lyric poem, which is something that expresses a personal emotion, usually in the first person. Okay, so that gives you a brief overview of this poem. I hope you found that useful. Thanks very much.